Let's get right to Dan Gilgoff. He is the religion editor for CNN.com. Have you ever been writing about the impact as you go through the exit polls about Catholics, about the evangelicals? Tell me a little bit about what your interpretation is of what you've seen.
Sure. Well, it seems to be such a stark turnaround from where we were this day in 2004, where it seemed to represent this kind of high watermark for Christian right influence in American politics. You had evangelicals and other so-called values voters sweeping George W. Bush into this resounding second-term victory. You had a dozen ballot initiatives, in most cases amending state constitutions to ban same-sex marriage, and really ushering in this entire new era of banning same-sex marriage. And last night, you saw the kind of unraveling of a whole lot of that. You saw, in the face of all of this Catholic Church opposition to the Obama administration, particularly on contraception and religious liberty, you saw Catholics turn out for President Obama. He won Catholics. In some states, like Pennsylvania, he won them even though he lost them in 2008. You saw in 2 states, for the first time, voters embracing same-sex marriage and legalizing same-sex marriage. And then you saw sort of the poster children of the Christian right, including Todd Akin in Missouri and Richard Murdoch in Indiana.
And I, too, certainly stand for life.
The remark came during the end of Tuesday's final debate for Indiana's open Senate seat, when Richard Murdoch was asked about abortion.
I think even when life begins in that horrible situation of rape, that it is something that God intended to happen.
Senior Obama campaign advisor David Axelrod tweeted, "Mitt's man Murdoch apes Akin in Indiana debate," reflecting a GOP that is way out of the mainstream. A not-so-subtle reminder of another comment made during the Missouri Senate race 2 months ago.
First of all, from what I understand from doctors, that's really rare. If it's a legitimate rape, the female body has ways to try to shut that whole thing down.
Just 3 days ago, Governor Romney endorsed Murdoch in a new ad.
This fall, I'm supporting Richard Murdoch for Senate.
But last night, the campaign distanced itself.
Those were those local races that people nationally were watching, of course, because they became huge national stories.
And they embodied this kind of hard right line on abortion. And sort of the Christian right came to their side when the Republican Party, in Akin's case, abandoned him. You saw both of those candidates defeated last night. And so I think what you saw could be described as a kind of repudiation of the Christian right agenda, which is so far from where we were just a few years ago.
On the issue of marriage, an historic defeat last night. Voters in Maine and Maryland have approved same-sex marriage, and voters in Minnesota have rejected a constitutional amendment that would ban it. Heather Sells has more.
4 states considered the issue of marriage on Tuesday. The question, would they continue a 32-state streak in which voters have consistently rejected gay marriage? The answer, no. In Maryland, voters upheld a new law legalizing same-sex marriage. In Maine, voters reversed themselves. Just 3 years ago, they voted against gay marriage. Last night, they approved it. In Minnesota, voters rejected a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage, but a state law outlawing it remains. Washington state voters also considered a measure to legalize it, but results are still pending. Traditional marriage supporters acknowledge the battle was uphill all the way.
These are deep blue states, Washington, Minnesota, Maryland, and Maine, and the supporters of marriage were outspent roughly 8-1.
Maine and Maryland now become the 7th and 8th states to legalize gay marriage. Strategist Frank Schubert coordinated the traditional marriage campaigns in all 4 states. He told CBN News that state-sanctioned gay marriage impacts children and can hurt those who oppose it.
People who believe that marriage is as God designed it are punished.
The outcome of these votes could influence the Supreme Court. It will soon decide whether to take up cases that challenge the law that denies federal recognition of gay marriage. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Now, Bishop Harry Jackson, you were part of a coalition of pastors to defeat this amendment. Why did it fall short?
Well, it fell short simply because of spending. I want to say something a little bit challenging to the GOP at this particular point, and that is they ran away from the social issues. There should have been a GOP response that was articulate and clear that said to blacks, Hispanics, we're not against you, and that I believe would have amped up participation and perhaps would have moved these victories forward. I put that squarely at the feet of the GOP, who basically said, you traditional church folks, you're on your own. We have a little bit in our campaign platform, but we're not going to fund you. We're not going to support you. And I think they lost the whole thing because of that lack of engagement and response on these issues.
Now, we saw victories for same-sex marriage in 3 states. Up till now, ballot measures have been successful in defeating gay marriage. Are we seeing a reversal now?
I don't think you're seeing a reversal. These are deep blue states, as Maggie Gallagher just said, but I believe you're seeing the economics. Christians are tired. If they've got to fund it versus there being a collaboration by one of the parties, as you had on the other side, is a problem. There were black pastors, for example, in Maryland, who were funded by the Democratic Party, who were on the air almost 24/7 for months. And that was trying to break down a stronghold of pro-marriage support, and it was paid for by the Democratic Party. GOP answers nada. So what do you expect? So I don't think this shows a lack of intensity by Christians on this area. It shows a lack of engagement of the GOP around social issues. If they keep doing this, their party will be extinct. No blacks, no Hispanics, and no moral issues. You can't survive.
All right, Bishop Jackson.